Welcome back to He Says, She Says, God Says. It's just me today. I'm just doing a quick introduction to our part 2 episode on money. And in this episode, I interview Pastor Chris Allen, who not only being a pastor, but also is a registered accountant and has years and years of experience in marriage counselling and helping couples both before they get married and after they get married manage the challenges around money in their marriage. He has lots of gold, lots of wisdom in here. So sit back, enjoy. I'm sure you'll take lots out of it. Pastor Chris Allen, welcome to He Says, She Says, God Says.
Thanks. I'm happy to participate.
We're here in Canberra. You're a local pastor here in Canberra.
I am.
And we're going to talk today a little bit about money, in particular, money in marriage. And you've got a fair bit of experience in this, both in pre and post-marriage counselling.
I do actually do post-marriage counselling, and also as a professional providing financial advice to individuals all the way through to companies. And
so you're an accountant by trade?
Commercial accountant, yeah. I did my degree way back in the early 70s. And obviously worked in various environments. And for the past 20 years, I've just recently retired, past 20 years just in a chartered accounting office.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you've got a fair bit of experience to talk about this topic, both in the natural sense, in terms of the natural principles, but then also obviously the spiritual principles that we read about. So when you're talking to couples before they get married, what are you typically talking to them about?
I go through the whole range of subjects. I think I cover 8 different topics, and money is obviously one of them. So we begin right back with talking about who they are, their personalities, etc., all the way through. Before I do money, I would cover the topic on sex. So money becomes a relief after having covered that topic. And they all get a meal from my wife before we do it. And that's always a great incentive. They'll come back for my wife's cooking. Quite often we'll be underneath a big grapevine, and so it was quite a nice romantic.
It is a lovely setting.
Yeah, but the concluding one is, what value are you as a couple now going to be able to bring to the fellowship? Which is a good concluding area. So preparing them to realise that not only are you getting married, but happy marriages are a great resource for the Lord.
Yeah, absolutely. So it doesn't matter what research we read, whether it's research that's done externally, or we see inside the church. Money can be a big issue in many marriages, can't it?
Well, if you talk about my post-marriage counselling, there's 2 areas that come up all the time. One is communication, surprise, and the other is money. When I'm dealing with work, and quite often, you're having to deal with breakups in marriage and preparing for divorces, etc. The biggest issue, is not extramarital relationships or whatever. It is generally breakdowns which will have a root in money. And the statistics on divorce identify that money and communication are the 2 biggest problems.
Yeah. And so what is it? What is it about, the issues around money that actually cause people to have issues in the relationship?
One of the reasons is not having a godly attitude to dealing with money. I always start with 2 issues that I try to get across, and they relate to how to have the appropriate attitude to money and pull them out of Scripture, all the issues to do with generosity, those types of things. But I also quote a proverb, which is Proverbs 13:4, And if you read that, you'll actually find that it's repeated around 5 times just within the Proverbs alone.
Is that right?
In various forms. So it says that the sluggard desires but has nothing, while the soul of the diligent shall be made fat. And so I talk about the issue of what that means, the people desiring but not doing anything. And what I say to them is, if God's going to bless that scripture, then it says the soul of the diligent shall be made fat. So I tell them that you don't have to be the financial guru. You just have to be diligent. God is the financial guru, and we invite God into our diligence. So you quite often hear people being told to go away and pray about something. Go away and pray about it. What are they actually going to be praying about? God's not going to bless laziness. God's not going to bless pride. But if we actually are diligent, and particularly in the area of money, you'll see that God blesses it. So some of the people that are very poor in terms of financial knowledge, but they really take the time to be diligent about it, you actually see the rewards in their marriage.
Yeah, okay. Wow. So as you're doing this pre-marriage counselling, what advice are you giving couples around how they should think about money, treat money, talk about money?
Well, I take quite a bit of time because I'm an accountant as well. They actually get a free session on, personal financial planning with the whole lot. So when you ask me that question, it takes me 2.5, 3 hours on the first night, depending on who they are. Some of them are very keen to know more. So, you could actually have 2 nights, 2 good meals from my wife. So we actually go all the way through it. And I know the topic that budgeting is often talked about, and I know that you've covered in other things. But to be able to get people to budget, so this is inside the church, outside the church, you can talk about it till you're blue in the face, but you'll still find that more than 50% of the people you've spoken to will not ever prepare a budget. The ones that do prepare the budget, I can give you examples of, the fruit of it. But the issues that come up is they get all keen about it, but they forget what kind of personality they are. Okay. And so I actually go through, we already would have done a personality chat, a temperament thing. Mm-hmm. So I've got a good idea about the 2 couples if we're talking about pre-marriage. And so I then challenge them, for your particular type of personality, what does that actually mean in relation to preparing a budget and maintaining a budget? So if I've got someone who I would describe as a peaceful phlegmatic, this is where everything goes through to the keeper, in a cricketing term, unless something happens. To tell them to be preparing a spreadsheet and doing a whole range of things, I'm actually wasting my time. Yeah. So what we actually do is, after we've chatted about the 2 types of personalities that we might have, we then actually look at how you would do a budget within those personalities, then how you would actually review a budget in those personalities, how you would continue to keep records with those personalities. So I really try and get them to understand who they are. So if I've got someone who's a heavy, perfect melancholic and whatever else, we might prepare a great little spreadsheet, and they'll run it for me. But for the majority of people, and so I'll give my wife as an example, my wife is definitely peaceful phlegmatic. So all I get her to do is to keep the records. So my job is to make sure I got a receipt for everything. Yeah. And she'll happily once a week she pulls them out of my wallet and pulls her stuff out, and she happily records it. And then no more than once or twice a year, we'll actually summarise that and group it, and she's got a good idea of where we're going.
Yeah.
So
with this personality, so you're doing some sort of personality assessment, or they're doing a personality profile.
That's right.
For them to understand their style. So you're then potentially uncovering that some people are just not interested, or it's not their strength, or there's one party in the couple that's going to be more naturally, based on their personality, naturally attuned to managing the budget versus another who may not be.
Yeah, I'll give you an example of one in the church. So this was post-marriage counselling. So
when we say post-marriage counselling, we're talking about post the wedding day, or post?
Well, yeah, they'd been married and they had teenagers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not post the marriage is now over.
No.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Got it? So they've got teenagers, but probably for 10 years leading up to finally getting me to come in and deal with the matter, they would argue about money. And both of them had reasonable jobs.
Yeah.
But they never actually went on any decent holidays. They never ever, if they had to do repairs to the house, it was always an issue, whatever. So the first time I chatted with them, I actually, because I didn't do pre-marriage counselling with this couple, they came to the church married. I actually did the personality temperament test with them and got them to recognise who they are. And the two personalities, one was a powerful choleric, which, really likes to control and whatever. The other was a perfect melancholic, that is into detail and whatever. And so the two of them are actually trying to run the house, but in their own particular ways. What I did is I knew that one of them was very busy, the other had a bit more time. So we designed it around the one that had a bit more time. And so we then went and actually prepared the budget, and, we talked through, what's fixed, what's variable, what is discretionary and whatever. We went through all that. And then we created a very simple budget, because even though this person, it was a powerful cleric, they were medical type people, not finance type people. So I created it for that person. And this person, and we set within it a goal that all the children had wanted. They wanted to go to Disneyland, and the wife had always wanted to go back to England to visit family, and they'd never ever had the money. And so we actually included those goals in the budget. And within a little bit over 2 years, they actually went on a holiday to the UK and came back via the US and went to Disneyland. And that was just simply by being diligent and running a budget and having these big goals. They were willing to sacrifice a lot of discretionary spending in other areas because they wanted to achieve these.
So to challenge that short-term thinking, that short-term spending for that longer-term goal of going on this holiday, yeah.
So it actually gave them the idea of understanding what discretionary spending was.
Yeah, wow. Wow, that's amazing. And so it was just understanding that their personalities were the reason why they were clashing about money, and setting up some frameworks and boundaries about who was going to do what.
They were both spending money because one was wanting to control and one was wanting to control. So there was never a discussion about, what are we going to do to replace the car? So those things disappeared out of that marriage.
Yeah, wow.
Which is lovely.
That's fantastic.
In relation to discretionary spending, I'll give you another one, which was one of the men in the fellowship was always having to help his mum, who was on the pension. She always needed money, and she vowed that she only gave herself the occasional little treats. So the son eventually, asked me could I talk to the mum? And all I did is I got her to keep all her receipts we did it for 2 months. And then she sat down with me and we actually categorised them. And lo and behold, more than 50% of her spending was luxurious. And eventually, we didn't actually change her spending habits. The son just realised what his mum was like, and he realised. But the reason I'm making one of these comments is why more than 50% of people never ever do a budget is because we're very happy to lie to ourselves. And we find this, as accountants, we will ask a question. How much do you spend on your groceries? And you have two categories of people. You have one which wants to tell you how extravagant they are, and the number will be this large number. And there's other people who want to tell you how frugal they are. But when we go then and go through the analysis and do it, both of them are lying to themselves, And we lie to ourselves because we have to live with ourselves, and we actually lie to ourselves about our finances. We believe that we can trust our memory. We can't trust our memory, and our estimates of how much we're spending in different areas, unless you record it, what you're living in is this world of lies because we have to live with ourselves. We don't want to feel that we're terrible budgeters. We don't want to feel that we're terrible with money. But unless you write it down, you've got no idea.
Yeah, right. Wow, that's really interesting. And I assume then, if you've got two people in a relationship where both are lying to themselves, right, it could potentially then cause issues in the relationship about, they might feel that they're lying to each other.
That's right. The reason for the arguments that come up is quite often the wife has been given the task of managing the grocery budget, and then when you come to some big bill and the money's not there, then an automatic assumption is you've spent too much on groceries. Yeah. When in reality, when you start looking at it, the wife's been doing quite well, but there's a number of other items that have come up which they just simply forget. You can't rely on your memory. Yeah. You've had to pay that, you've had that, and you've had that, and it wasn't the groceries at all. But the argument will all be about the wife hasn't managed the grocery.
And that's because I assume that, the groceries are a regular thing every week, right, as opposed to those once-off discretionary things you've forgotten about. Yeah, okay, that's interesting. And so, you're not a spring chicken, right? You've been doing this for a few years now. Do you think that people's view of discretionary spending has changed over the years?
The world has changed. So I'm definitely part of the baby boomer generation. And the stresses that we had in relation to money are different to the stresses now. We also had...
Can you tell me what the differences are?
Okay, well, if I use my example, even though we were in that period where interest rates, our first mortgage might have been, in Canberra, you got a special concession by the government, so it was around 7.5%. But your second mortgage could be anywhere from 11% to 15%, But surprise, surprise, the average length of a mortgage in Canberra, you would take it out over 10 years and generally pay it off in 7 years. Now, that tells you that it was a very different type of part of a budgeting process. So we were able to see the light at the end of a tunnel for a mortgage because we knew if we hammered it hard, we could actually get rid of it pretty quickly. Current generation of people are taking out mortgages 30, 40 years. So considering about hitting that hard, even though as an accountant, we might start looking at, you need to bring this mortgage down. Because these time frames are so much longer, there's a total different psyche that you're dealing with. The other thing is two parents working. You have downtime means different things, when two parents are working. So there was a book that was written Kiyosaki way back in the 80s.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but he followed it up with another one called the Cash Flow Quadrant. So where he categorised people into 4 groups, and you had the saver, which was the people who were employees. Yeah. So an employee, you categorise as if you're going to do any good, you have to learn how to save. The next category was the self-employed, the contractor, that group. The third group was the business people, and the fourth group were the investors. You have a higher proportion of people now that are in that category of the self-employed or contractor area. Kiyosaki categorised those people as the spenders. Right. And the reason for it, if I use a doctor, and I've had a number of examples where I've actually had to go through and do planning for doctors because, they want to plan at a certain time for their retirement. And so the doctor contractor or, on contract, so they've generally got a lovely house. They generally got 2 very nice cars. Their children have gone off to private education, and you're always able to talk to them about the lovely holiday that they've been on. And the reason is contracting, and self-employed people, there's an awful lot of stress that goes with that, and it's a very different stress to an employee. And so they feel they have to reward themselves. And so there's always the good holiday. The wife has been working and they're working, so they actually will go out an awful lot more times than what the baby boomers did. So it's the time horizons associated with money and heavier stress because you've got 2 workers and a higher proportion of them are in employment, which has actually a higher stress level. Yeah. So Kiyosaki recognised that way back when he wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Okay.
So we might include the links to those books if people are interested in reading them. Would that be worth them having a read?
They're dated, but the information underlying them is still useful.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, good.
There has been people pick up. They were pivotal books, and a lot of people have written books picking up on those topics.
Yeah, okay. So, the world's different now in a whole range of different elements. So, a young couple getting married, what advice would you give them today around thinking about their finances, thinking about mortgages, buying houses, etc.?
We obviously try and deal with the issue of budgeting at some point. So I do give them 2 key factors. The sluggard desires but has nothing, but the soul of the diligent is made fat, and talk about what diligence actually means. Yeah. And I also go through the issue of giving, particularly in a church environment. They assume that just means tithes and offerings, but it actually is bigger. It's about having the right heart attitude. So I provide 2 fundamentals, and get them to understand them.
Yeah. And so what does diligence look like? So in your view, what does diligence look like for a young couple?
In diligence, it actually does mean keeping records in a financial setting. So moving away from baby boomers, so if I was dealing with a baby boomer, I would talk about a spreadsheet, and we would sit down and prepare a spreadsheet. Even I was chatting to one of the professors from the ANU who happens to be in our fellowship. He runs a spreadsheet, and he's a professor in accounting.
So for a younger couple, it would be an app or something like that.
That's exactly right. So what I do is we actually then talk through the different types of apps that are available. So some of these apps are geared at working towards being an investor. Yeah. Some of them are geared towards, the banking type apps are geared towards getting a mortgage and then managing mortgages. So depending on what their income and whatever else, you can talk about the various apps. And the advantage now of these apps is that once you determine, what your discretionary, what you fixed, etc., and you've categorised them, and as long as you keep using your cards, it'll categorise them for you. So you spend actually more time actually looking at the results
rather than
doing the hack work. So spreadsheets has the hack work, and then you got to do the review and then the constant record keeping. So the next generations down, they've actually got a lot more financial pressures, but if they're willing to take on some of these apps, they actually find that they've actually got tools that allow them to manage their money better.
And it's real-time data in most cases too, isn't it? Which obviously helps in decision-making.
And that also gives them prompts, so some of these apps are free, and so they don't have a lot of the bells and whistles. Some of them you might be paying $8 a month or whatever. They're not a lot of money, but it'll actually prompt and so remind you that you've actually got a large bill coming up, etc., because it creates patterns.
Yeah, okay. We might talk about those at another time in terms of what apps you're typically seeing people get benefit from, and maybe we'll include some links for those in the podcast too. So diligence around record keeping is obviously important. Yeah. Does it extend beyond that?
It does. So it also means to be open and honest with each other. So it moves into communicating so that we're not imposing the burden on one of the parties. So even though one may take on a greater share of it, I actually want it to actually be a shared issue, and so that they also not only know how to contribute appropriately, but they're also able to look forward to the rewards and that are coming. So it means a lot more planning. So modern day young people, they've got an issue of having to look at mortgages that are substantially bigger mortgages than what we were looking at during our baby boomer
and
days.
Substantially, not just because, the value of money is different, but substantially in terms of mortgage value versus income as a percentage.
Exactly. Saving up for a deposit when I was young was a 12 months hard hit. Saving up for a deposit now is substantially greater.
And is that just because of that, or is it because, when you were young, saving up for a deposit, you had less things to spend on, less pressures to buy things? Is there that too?
There is. Life was definitely a lot simpler. But having said that, a car was a much bigger decision point than what it is now. But the biggest change really has been the cost of housing and the mortgage associated.
Do you think we have different expectations now in terms of our first house or our second house compared to when you were?
I also talk about the strategies that you can do when you're looking at housing. So if you're wanting to buy your forever house, then that has one financial strategy. If you're looking at seeing a stepping stone to your forever house, that has a different strategy. So there are also different types of houses that you're looking at. So when you're young and you don't have children, etc., moving into a unit can be a strategy that you are wanting to do. I do talk to them about the difference between a unit and buying a house, and how units are valued, and the risks associated with buying units versus the risk of a house.
In terms of capital growth risk, or?
Well, the value of a unit is made up of a small amount of the land, a small amount of the construction, small amount quite often of common area, and then a huge area which is called froth. So units have a lot more froth. If you're thinking of it as a milkshake or whatever, units have a lot more froth built into their price than a house. So a house is a huge proportion of it will be the land value, a smaller proportion will be the bill value, and very little froth. Now, froth is done by, you have rising markets and declining markets. So froth rises and ebbs and flows in that. But units, the amount that can be absorbed by froth is much higher. So they're able to talk about the location, the fact that you're on the 18th floor and you've got these lovely views and, a whole range
to
of
the
things.
shops and you can
You've got the pool and whatever, so units are a lot harder investment decision. And I'll give you an example of someone who bought a unit. They decided that they would buy a unit so that they could get into the property market. The unit was a high rise, and when they bought it, unbeknownst to them, the people who were supposed to be doing the property management, so the people who were doing the body corporate, had made no real allowance for when the units had got to the point where the external cladding needed to be repaired and needed to be painted.
Right. So when they bought it, I said the strata fees are going to be, $1,000 a quarter or whatever.
But no idea of what a sinking fund was. Yeah. They did not look at the sinking fund, had no idea that there was almost no money in the sinking fund. Yeah. And so they bought into a $1.6 million bill that was coming to that high-rise unit. None of that had been mentioned to them. Yeah. If you don't ask the right questions, you don't get the right answer.
And so then at some point in the future, right, the property maintenance, or strata management people will come to all the unit holders and say, we need to spend this much money.
They'd already come to the unit holders. The people who owned the unit knew they couldn't afford to put that money in. Yeah. They sold the unit, sold it at a reasonable price, but the people who were buying it, that was the top end of their price. The real value of that unit had included a little bit of what should be going into a sinking fund, but they didn't have any of that spare money to pick it up. Another couple they bought, and there was a retrofitting for fire safety, and they received a much smaller number, but it was still $50,000 that they had to go looking for.
So it's I imagine it's no different than just buying a normal house. You've got to do your research on the house. You've got to get
I'm identifying there's more research that needs to be done if you're buying into a unit, and I'm identifying you need to understand what a sinking fund is, what your body corporate people's responsibilities are, and and how they're managing it. So you need to be a lot more diligent in those areas. So you do have a lot of legislation that is attempting to manage those things, but they're only managing some of it. They don't take away the whole issue. The best person to manage your money is you. The people selling the property are not there to help you.
It's not in their best interest to do that. It's their best interest to sell you the property. So, when couples get into financial distress, what are the main causes of them getting into real financial distress?
They haven't asked enough questions. Yeah. They have relied on their memory. They haven't dealt with a budget. They have no idea how much they're spending on discretionary. So very simple things. Apart from people losing jobs or whatever, you do have those other issues that come along. When those issues do come along, banks and other people are willing to help, and so some people try and deal with the stress themselves and then take too long. If you've lost your job, then be open and honest with whoever's got your mortgage, whoever's dealing with your utilities, etc.
And so out of that's payment plans or deferral of fee, etc. Yep.
Yeah. So, and if you're running a budget, you're actually far easier able to talk to these people than if you're not running a budget.
Because you've got the data there to talk to them.
You've got data there.
Yeah.
So young people, if they're running an app, the bank, already is happy because they can actually see what you're dealing with. And they're willing to give you little holiday periods while you get yourself back in order. So husband and wives need to know what's going on, so one's not holding all the stress. And record keeping, please, whatever you do, keep some form of records.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's good. So one of the things that Kiyosaki talks about in his books is good debt versus bad debt. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, I can. So first of all, being a baby boomer, we had the issue of hire purchase, and hire purchase created a lot of problems for people. So
for those that don't understand what hire purchase is,
I'll just identify you were borrowing money for items like your refrigerator or your furniture and whatever. People would get into trouble, so the government effectively legislated hire purchase to the point where banks and lending agencies, it wasn't the most attractive way of lending money. So they've come up with more creative ways of lending money. And so no further payments until, 2026 or whatever, are really where the lending agencies are looking at how they can get around the legislation that corrected all the problems that were coming up with hire purchase. Even worse than that is, your payday loans and your those types of afterpays and stuff, where the pain comes after the pleasure. Yeah. And if you do that too much, where you create problems. So I like...
Well, the other part about that too is that they're often smaller incremental amounts. Oh, I'll just put that on Afterpay, or I'll put this on Afterpay, and it's only $5 a month or $10 a month or $50 or $100 a month, and you do that 10 times.
People, again, lie to themselves about how much they spend on the various categories. So they do a budget in their head that allows them to get into these payment programs, but they should understand that these people aren't lending you money, like this was originally GE Money, doing this. They're not lending you money simply because they know you're going to meet the criteria they're in. They know that more than 50% of people are not going to meet the criteria of meeting that deadline date. Yeah. And then you've got a whole range of penalty situations that come into play. So
they're basically betting on you're not going to be able to meet it, and then going to stitch you up.
A proportion of them not meeting it.
And stitch you up with a big interest rate or penalty.
We had a classic of someone buying a computer for their child because they needed one for school. $2,000 computer ends up costing $5,000, simply because they didn't run a budget and they had no idea that this money was going to come up at this particular point in time, and they didn't have the money. So you've got the day-to-day financial type issues, but then you've actually got what we refer to bad debt, borrowing for holidays, borrowing for things that can be big numbers, but borrowing and then having to try and repay.
So I think if I remember from reading the book, Kiyosaki talks about borrowing for things that are going to appreciate in value rather than things that are going to depreciate in value.
Yeah, and so we've had a little interesting situation with cars where we actually went through a little bump where cars actually went up in value, but the historical trend for cars is that they will go down in value, and not only will they go down in value, they'll increase the running costs, etc.
So in fact, effectively you lose twice, right? Because you lose on the depreciation of the car and its value, and then you lose on the interest that you've paid on that car as well.
But in terms of good debt, it would say that borrowing for an investment or borrowing for an asset, a house, etc., can be good debt. But if we look at the bank's lending, they'll lend you up to 50% if you're engaging in some kind of investment, whereas they'll lend you up to 80% if you're buying a house. Yeah. So depending on what you're dealing with, there is also that risk element associated with your investment, and you should be able to get an idea just simply on who's going to lend you the money. If they're willing to lend you 80% of the purchase price, then we're moving into a lower risk purchase.
Because the bank's taking less risk, exactly. Right? And because the bank, they don't want to lose their money either.
No.
And so no one wants to end up in another GFC, so they're going to be relatively stringent around making sure that that's a good investment.
If you're going to borrow for a share portfolio, then the amount that they'll lend you is much, much lower. They're not going to take the risk of the share market. People then they finally do get a house, and then they start to build up some equity in that house. And then they go to a financial advisor, and the financial advisor sees this as, this equity is now something that I can actually use to borrow against for further investments. I always treat the family house in a different way to treating other investments. So you might be surprised, but most accountants are very conservative when it comes to money. And it's probably because they've seen the problems that a lot of other people have got themselves into.
They weren't born that way.
No. So very conservative when it comes to using the equity in your own home to do further investment. So financial advisors love that equity, and they like you to use that equity and borrow against that equity. I'm just identifying I'm not a financial advisor, and I haven't got that risk profile that financial advisors seem to have. But they're there to make money. They're not there, again, to look after your money. So be very careful with using equity in your own home for buying other things. Definitely not using it to go on the holiday. If you're going to be investing in something else, let's hope it's another asset.
Yeah. So what about using the equity in your own home to buy an investment property?
That's where if we've got like for like, so we've actually got a house and then we're buying a property. If we're buying a house and we're buying a unit, they're actually two different types of risk profiles. But if we're buying a house and a house, they're identical risk profiles. I don't have an issue, because if I need to sell the investment property, I can then do so, and I'm moving it in. If I'm buying in one area, so I'm living in Canberra and then I'm buying in Brisbane, I'm actually buying in two different markets. If it's equity in my own home, I am much more comfortable people borrowing within the same market, because I'll move in a similar pattern. But
plus, they're probably going to understand the market better as well. So we're talking about good debt versus bad debt, but of course you can still have good debt but make bad investment decisions. You can buy the house at too much. You can buy it in the wrong suburb. You can buy it when house prices are coming in down. So all of those things obviously are separate to the whether it's good or bad debt.
So whether it's in Kiyosaki's book or another book that I've read, but I can still remember exactly, 1883 in a UK newspaper.
You can remember 1883? You're not that old.
The date, 1883, there was a newspaper article that came in one of the UK papers, which was talking about the emotional investment cycle and talking about how people generally, so this is 1883, remember, people would invest in the shares, the stock market as it was in those days. At the end of the boom, invest ready for the crash. or they would be looking at a property market that is moving up, and then they eventually get the desire to build just as the property market. So it's called the emotional investment cycle, and people jump in to it at an emotional level, whereas if you do your homework, you should be able to go into the share market at any time of the cycle. You should be able to go into the property market at any time in the cycle, as long as you've done your homework.
Today they would call that FOMO, or fear of missing out, right? Okay. Everyone else is, on this, whether it's Bitcoin or property prices or whatever, and they see everybody else and they think they're going to miss out, so they jump in as well.
But they wait, and then the emotion becomes too great. And so they were actually able to graph that and identify where had the emotional investment cycle, and for many years it would follow this pattern. You knew what was going to follow, where the share market got up to, the money would then move into property, then the money would move into fixed, then it would. So do your homework, yeah. The other issue with location, you hear real estate agents make that comment. So I bought a property which was not in the location, but I don't also pay an awful lot of money for my rates and whatever. But I knew that over time it would be a good location. But the property, the suburb that I live in is really what I would describe working class suburb. So my utility costs and my costs associated with rates and whatever, were very, very manageable. The only time I would be looking at investing in somewhere where you had the right location would be if it wasn't my forever home. When you buy your forever home, you're bringing in other issues about where is the schools located, where are the shops, where are the other facilities. Yeah. But if you're looking for capital growth, then location's important. But your forever home is not about capital growth.
Yeah, and so potentially, as you're not your first house, but as you're maturing, right, in age, and you're getting into your 40s or 50s or 60s, you're that next house that you're going to be in for a long time. You're looking to have lower cost of running that house.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And being a lot more attuned to the kind of lifestyle that you're going to have.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good.
So another topic that I mentioned to people, because insurance comes up on televisions all the time. Why does it come up on televisions all the time? Because it makes a lot of money for the insurance companies. So when we talk as professional accountants about life insurance should only be taken out in our understanding is where we've actually got debt that we don't want to be leaving to the surviving partner. If the surviving partner has got a very good job and whatever else, and that debt is not actually going to create an issue, then don't worry about it. Yeah. So
let's say we've got a couple, right? One has a very high income, the other doesn't, and let's say they've got $500,000 worth of mortgage or $1 million worth.
So we need to, if we've got $1 million worth of mortgage, then we probably need to look at if one doesn't have a good income, or you've got 3 children, 4 children, or whatever, and the debt is $1 million. Well, insurance.
Yeah,
will cover it.
So you insure
as it goes down.
Yeah,
your insurance should go down.
So you insure the person who has the income that services the mortgage. Yep. You don't necessarily need to have the same level of insurance on the person who doesn't.
Exactly right. Yeah. In fact, you may not even take out insurance on the other person at all. So it should be related to the issue of leaving debt. It should have the way the insurance industry sells it. You could gamble on your partner dying and suddenly become a millionaire. That is not why we take out life insurance. But as another precautionary one, we had a couple in a home who forgot to take out house insurance and came home from to find their house had burnt down and created issues. So insurance is there to manage risk, no other reason.
Yeah, and big risk, right?
Big
because, if you're talking about your house burning down, you've got a very big mortgage, right? That's a very big risk that's going to have pretty long-term, profound impacts.
Yes, that's right. They had to move away from Canberra. Canberra was just too expensive for them. They couldn't afford to carry what was left.
Yeah. Wow, that would have been really tough.
Very tough.
Good warning for others, I think.
Yes. Another thing I like to bring up is, because I deal with personality very early on, identifying that different personalities can take on different levels of risk. And so there's financial risk and emotional risk.
Yeah.
So if you're someone that is highly strung, but, where you're wanting to get into some kind of investments, etc., and all the emotion goes with it, then, I'm identifying that, marriage and happy life is far more important than bringing stress in. So you need to understand that risk has to be dealt with financially and emotionally. And if you don't have the emotions to deal with it, then don't take it on.
Yeah. And I imagine it's unusual to have two people who are married who have the same,
That's exactly right.
Yeah, okay. So really what you're looking to do is draw the strengths out from your partner to help manage that.
Yeah, but you don't want, you might be the high risk taker, but you've got a partner that worries about the grocery bill, then please don't take out some high risk property, because you're going to just make a rod for your own back.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's really good.
The other thing is, sometimes you have people that are getting married and they've previously been married, and they've both got different levels of finances that they're bringing in. And some couples then like to keep separate bank accounts. I prefer if you have joint bank accounts, but simply, once bitten, twice shy, a lot of people will want to carry separate bank accounts. But what I identified to them is those bank accounts have to be transparent. So, one couple, is not receiving their bank statements and it's private from the other, where we need to be open. If we've actually made the commitment that we're marrying, then please, if you're wanting to run separate bank accounts, they're not private or secret bank accounts.
Otherwise, we're not one body, are we? We're two separate bodies living in the same household. So one of the things that comes up, in some marriage counselling, other things that I've seen, we talk about, is that we often bring our own upbringings into our marriage, and so I assume it's no different in terms of our financial upbringings. What we see our parents do, we'll bring some of those philosophies and thinkings and ideas into our own marriage. As a parent, what are the things that we can do for our children to give them, potentially good financial understanding or good knowledge, so that they're not taking bad habits and bad knowledge into their marriage?
Well, you're bringing up the rich dad, poor dad scenarios. From reading the books, you'll know that a lot of parents actually have poor financial habits, and the Australian society, they're constantly being told that 50% of Australians live payday to payday or week to week. So if we've got children, we want them to see someone who's actually keeping records. We want them to see that when mum and dad are talking about going on a holiday, that mum and dad are talking about we're planning for that holiday, and we're setting aside money for the holiday. So those things, we would refer to in the psychology world as priming. So that it's good priming to set these words within the kids' heads and what they see their parents doing. My wife and I have never had an argument on money. And the reason is my dad was in self-employed, and mum was a stay-at-home mum. And there was always stress about money in the house. There was 8 children as well, so good reason, good reason. But I made a vow to myself that I would never allow money to be an issue within our house. So we have always kept records. We have always run a budget. And my children have seen also the fruit of that, you know. So,
and I assume as parents, you know, when you talk about priming, if we're giving everything to our kids that they ask for, and we shower them in gifts and whatever new fad toy or game or whatever that that their friends have, and we're giving them that or providing that whenever they want or need it, I assume we're setting them up for not good habits in terms of saving and understanding that things take time. And
now the other thing that my wife does is the children can actually calculate exactly how much they're actually going to get for their birthday money, and they know exactly what they're actually going to get for when they turn 18, etc. So they actually plan for what they're actually going to do with that money. So it actually creates an expectation. Once they've finished their 10th birthday, they know exactly how much they're going to get for their 11th birthday.
They're running a budget.
They know exactly, if I'm going to be buying Lego or whatever, I know what Nonna is going to contribute. But it's actually, it's not like some random toy that they get. We actually provide an anticipation and a thinking. And so all of them actually use their birthday money very cleverly. They know they're Nonna's going to give me this, and I've been saving up for this particular dress. With Nonna's money, I'm actually going to be able to afford it or whatever.
Wow.
So the Italians have a different way to the good old Irish Catholic way, which I grew up with at 18, kicked out the door and you're on your own. There's an expectation that we will work as a family, but we use the money carefully and wisely.
And that discretionary spending isn't out of control.
Definitely not.
Yeah, okay, that's good.
And we have other things. They know that Poppy has never spent $1 on a Slurpee. Poppy has never, they can tell you all these things, because
I should go and interview them and ask them what Poppy doesn't spend his money on.
Yeah, no, they know. So, but it is just good little things that they know how Nonna and Poppy operate.
Well, I think the principle there is that as parents, we have a responsibility to show good financial management to our children. Otherwise, we're not actually doing the right thing for them in terms of their future.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Well, that's what a fantastic list of topics for people to dwell on and to learn from. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thanks heaps for sharing with us all of your experience over the years and the things that you've learnt through. Not only out of the scriptures, right, but also from your own personal career, and then obviously from other couples and what you've seen them do. So thank you.
Let's hope it's helpful.
I'm sure it is. That'll be wonderful. Thank you.
Amen.
Well, there you have it. If you didn't get something out of that you can take into your marriage, you probably weren't listening. That was great. Lots of gold in there for us. Thank you, Pastor Chris, for sharing your story. I really enjoyed our conversation. Until next time, God bless.